Chloe had always been drawn to old things. Antiques, relics, forgotten treasures. There was something about their history, their silent stories, that intrigued her. She often spent her weekends browsing through secondhand stores, dusting off old books and trying on clothes that had been worn by people long gone. But none of that compared to the pull of the shop on Pine Street. It was the kind of place that seemed to exist outside time, as though it had been there for centuries, tucked away between two towering buildings that were far more modern than its crumbling stone facade. The shop was called Whispers and Wonders, a name that felt like a promise, a secret. Chloe had passed by it countless times, yet something had always held her back from going inside. The window displayed all sorts of oddities: tarnished silver spoons, ancient clocks that hadn't worked in decades, faded paintings of landscapes long forgotten. But today was different. The moment Chloe stepped over the threshold, the scent of old wood and incense filled her lungs. The air was heavy, thick with dust and the weight of 1,000 untold stories. The bell above the door jangled, its sound almost too loud in the silence. "Welcome," came a voice from behind the counter. Chloe turned to see an elderly man, his wrinkled face barely visible beneath a thick mane of white hair. He was hunched over, his gnarled hands working on something behind the counter. His eyes were dark and sharp, as though he could see into her very soul. "Hello," Chloe said, her voice sounding small in the vast, cluttered space. "You're a curious one," the man remarked, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He didn't look like he was talking about her appearance, but about something deeper. "I suppose I am," Chloe said, glancing around. The shop was larger than it seemed from the outside. It stretched back far, filled with all manner of strange objects: ornate mirrors, tarnished jewelry, porcelain dolls with eyes that seemed to follow her. But it was the mirror in the back corner that caught her attention. It was large, taller than any person, and its frame was intricate. Dark metal twisted into shapes that looked almost like words, symbols that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. "That one," the man's voice interrupted her thoughts. Chloe nodded, unable to pull her eyes away from the mirror. "A curious piece indeed," he said softly. "It's been here longer than I can remember. It calls to those who see it, and it never lets them leave unchanged." Chloe's heart skipped a beat, and she wasn't sure if it was the man's words or the mirror itself that unsettled her. She wasn't superstitious, but something about the mirror made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "Is it for sale?" she asked, the question escaping her lips before she could stop it. The man chuckled, a sound that sent a cold shiver down her spine. "Everything here has a price, my dear. But that mirror, it's not something you buy and sell, it's something you inherit." His eyes glinted strangely as he said it, as though the words had a hidden meaning. Chloe hesitated, a nervous excitement building inside her. She wasn't sure why, but she felt as though she needed to have it. "How much?" she asked again, her voice more insistent now. The man studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. Finally, he spoke. "The cost is not in gold, nor in silver. The price is something far more precious." He paused, watching her closely. "But if you wish to take it, it's yours. No one else has ever wanted it quite like you." Chloe swallowed hard, her curiosity outweighing any sense of caution. "I'll take it," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. The man nodded, his lips curling into a thin smile. "So be it." With that, Chloe paid the price, what little it cost in money, and walked out of the shop, the heavy mirror now in her possession. The man's words echoed in her mind. The price is something far more precious. At the time, she didn't fully understand what he meant. Chloe couldn't shake the feeling that something was off as she walked home with the mirror. The cool night air did little to calm the unease that had settled in her chest. The mirror, wrapped in layers of old fabric, felt oddly heavy for its size. It was as though it carried a weight far beyond its physical mass. Every step she took, she felt the strange sensation of being watched. She quickened her pace, her breath coming in shallow bursts. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, distorted shadows on the sidewalk. The familiar sights of her neighborhood seemed different tonight, somehow darker, more oppressive. As she rounded the corner to her apartment building, Chloe glanced down at the mirror in her arms. The fabric had shifted, revealing a small part of the ornate frame. For a brief moment, Chloe thought she saw something move inside the glass. A shadow, perhaps, or the reflection of something that wasn't there. She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. It was nothing, just her imagination. But as she reached the front door of her apartment, she paused. The lock clicked as she twisted the knob, but something felt wrong in the way her apartment had never felt before. The air inside was thick, stifling, as though it had been waiting for her. Chloe dropped the mirror onto the couch, eager to get it out of her hands. As she did, she noticed her reflection in the glass. But it wasn't the same. The Chloe in the eye. Mirror had a look in her eyes, something cold and distant, a look that didn't belong to her. The reflection blinked, and for a moment Chloe wasn't sure if she had moved. It was just a trick of the light, she told herself. The strange weight of the mirror was playing tricks on her mind. She turned her back on the mirror and began to make her way to the kitchen, but a soft whisper stopped her. Chloe. The voice was barely audible, but it was unmistakable. It sounded like it came from the direction of the mirror, though she had not moved it. Frozen in place, she listened. The apartment was silent again, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. But the whisper had been real. She was sure of it. Chloe, come closer. Her pulse quickened. She tried to ignore it, but the whisper seemed to grow louder in her mind. Like a compulsion she couldn't resist. It was as though the mirror was calling her, urging her to approach. Chloe took a hesitant step toward the couch. The air seemed colder now, and her breath misted in front of her. She reached out slowly, her hand trembling as she touched the edge of the mirror's frame. For a brief moment, everything went still. The whispering stopped. The air in the room stilled. She could feel the coldness of the glass against her fingers, almost as though it were alive, breathing. And then, just as quickly as it had started, a flicker of movement in the mirror caught her eye. She looked down at her reflection, but this time her face was pale, the eyes wide and terrified, as though something was about to happen. Before she could pull her hand away, the mirror rippled like water disturbed by a stone. The reflection in the glass distorted, shifting in impossible ways, elongating and warping. Chloe recoiled, stumbling backward. Her breath caught in her throat, and panic set in. But then, just as suddenly, the mirror went still again. The reflection returned to normal. Chloe stared at it for a moment, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had it been a trick of the light again? Was she losing her mind? Or had the mirror done something? A faint, almost imperceptible pulse emanated from the glass, like a heartbeat, steady, rhythmic, and unsettling. Chloe's hand remained hovering over the mirror's surface, and she realized she couldn't tear her gaze away. It was as if the mirror had a strange hold over her, one she couldn't explain. But no, she couldn't let it control her. It was just a mirror. She had to be rational. Shaking her head, Chloe backed away from, her eyes never leaving the glass. She had to get a grip. She had to stop letting it get to her. But as she turned away, the whisper came again, louder this time, more insistent. Chloe. Her pulse spiked. This time it didn't come from the mirror, but from somewhere deeper, from somewhere inside her. She gasped, a chill running down her spine. The voice was inside her own head. It's already too late. The apartment felt colder still. The shadows seemed to stretch and flicker at the edges of her vision, as though they were alive, moving in the corners of the room. She needed to sleep. She needed to forget about the mirror for now. But deep down, Chloe knew that the feeling, the pull, the presence, would not let her rest. Not until she gave in. Chloe lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. The whispering had stopped, but the feeling of being watched remained, like a weight pressing on her chest. She hadn't been able to shake the image of the mirror, the distorted reflection, the warped figure, and the strange pulse that seemed to beat from the glass. She tried to tell herself it was just her mind playing tricks. She'd had a long day after all. The strange encounter at the antique shop, the excitement of getting the mirror home, maybe it was all too much. But no matter how hard she tried to convince herself, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. The apartment felt unnervingly quiet. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the building settling were the only sounds. But Chloe felt as though the silence held something else, something darker. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly 3 a.m. The usual sound of traffic from the street below was absent, as though the whole city had gone still. A strange fog had settled over her mind, making it impossible to drift off into sleep. Chloe had always been drawn to old things. Antiques, relics, forgotten treasures. There was something about their history, their silent stories that intrigued her. She often spent her weekends browsing through second-hand stores, dusting off old books and trying on clothes that had been worn by people long gone. But none of that compared to the pull of the shop on Pine Street. It was the kind of place that seemed to exist outside time, as though it had been there for centuries, tucked away between two towering buildings that were far more modern than its crumbling stone facade. The shop was called Whispers and Wonders, a name that felt like a promise, a secret. Chloe had passed by it countless times, yet something had always held her back from going inside. The window displayed all sorts of oddities: tarnished silver spoons, ancient clocks that hadn't worked in decades, faded paintings of landscapes long forgotten. But today was different. The moment Chloe stepped over the threshold, the scent of old wood and incense filled her lungs. The air was heavy, thick with dust and the weight of 1,000 untold stories. The bell above the door jangled, its sound almost too loud in the silence. "Welcome," came a voice from behind the counter. Chloe turned to see an elderly man, his wrinkled face barely visible beneath a thick mane of white hair. He was hunched over, his gnarled hands working on something behind the counter. His eyes were dark and sharp, as though he could see into her very soul. "Hello," Chloe said, her voice sounding small in the vast, cluttered space. "You're a curious one," the man remarked, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He didn't look like he was talking about her appearance, but about something deeper. "I suppose I am," Chloe said, glancing around. The shop was larger than it seemed from the outside. It stretched back far, filled with all manner of strange objects: ornate mirrors, tarnished jewelry, porcelain dolls with eyes that seemed to follow her, but it was the mirror in the back corner that caught her attention. It was large, taller than any person, and its frame was intricate. Dark metal twisted into shapes that looked almost like words, symbols that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. "That one?" The man's voice interrupted her thoughts. Chloe nodded, unable to pull her eyes away from the mirror. "A curious piece indeed," he said softly. "It's been here longer than I can remember. It calls to those who see it, and it never lets them leave unchanged." Chloe's heart skipped a beat, and she wasn't sure if it was the man's words or the mirror itself that unsettled her. She wasn't superstitious, but something about the mirror made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "Is it for sale?" she asked, the question escaping her lips before she could stop it. The man chuckled, a sound that sent a cold shiver down her spine. "Everything here has a price, my dear. But that mirror, it's not something you buy and sell. It's something you inherit." His eyes glinted strangely as he said it, as though the words had a hidden meaning. Chloe hesitated, a nervous excitement building inside her. She wasn't sure why, but she felt as though she needed to have it. "How much?" she asked again, her voice more insistent now. The man studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. Finally, he spoke. "The cost is not in gold, nor in silver. The price is something far more precious." He paused, watching her closely. "But if you wish to take it, it's yours. No one else has ever wanted it quite like you." Chloe swallowed hard, her curiosity outweighing any sense of caution. "I'll take it," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. The man nodded, his lips curling into a thin smile. So, be it. With that, Chloe paid the price, what little it cost in money, and walked out of the shop, the heavy mirror now in her possession. The man's words echoed in her mind. The price is something far more precious. At the time, she didn't fully understand what he meant. Chloe couldn't shake the feeling that something was off as she walked home with the mirror. The cool night air did little to calm the unease that had settled in her chest. The mirror, wrapped in layers of old fabric, felt oddly heavy for its size. It was as though it carried a weight far beyond its physical mass. Every step she took, she felt the strange sensation of being watched. She quickened her pace, her breath coming in shallow bursts. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, distorted shadows on the sidewalk. The familiar sights of her neighborhood seemed different tonight, somehow darker, more oppressive. As she rounded the corner to her apartment building, Chloe glanced down at the mirror in her arms. The fabric had shifted, revealing a small part of the ornate frame. For a brief moment, Chloe thought she saw something move inside the glass. A shadow, perhaps, or the reflection of something that wasn't there. She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. It was nothing, just her imagination. But as she reached the front door of her apartment, she paused. The lock clicked as she twisted the knob, but something felt wrong. Wrong in the way her apartment had never felt before. The air inside was thick, stifling, as though it had been waiting for her. Chloe dropped the mirror onto the couch, eager to get it out of her hands. As she did, she noticed her reflection in the glass. But it wasn't the same. The Chloe in the mirror had a look in her eyes, something cold and distant, a look that didn't belong to her. The reflection blinked, and for a moment Chloe wasn't sure if she had moved. It was just a trick of the light, she told herself. The strange weight of the mirror was playing tricks on her mind. She turned her back on the mirror and began to make her way to the kitchen, but a soft whisper stopped her. "Chloe." The voice was barely audible, but it was unmistakable. It sounded like it came from the direction of the mirror, though she had not moved it. Frozen in place, she listened. The apartment was silent again, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. But the whisper had been real. She was sure of it. "Chloe." Come closer, her pulse quickened. She tried to ignore it, but the whisper seemed to grow louder in her mind, like a compulsion she couldn't resist. It was as though the mirror was calling her, urging her to approach. Chloe took a hesitant step toward the couch. The air seemed colder now, and her breath misted in front of her. She reached out slowly, her hand trembling as she touched the edge of the mirror's frame. For a brief moment, everything went still. The whispering stopped. The air in the room stilled. She could feel the coldness of the glass against her fingers, almost as though it were alive, breathing. And then, just as quickly as it had started, a flicker of movement in the mirror caught her eye. She looked down at her reflection, but this time her face was pale, the eyes wide and terrified, as though something was about to happen. Before she could pull her hand away, the mirror rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. The reflection in the glass distorted, shifting in impossible ways, elongating and warping. Chloe recoiled, stumbling backward. Her breath caught in her throat, and panic set in. But then, just as suddenly, the mirror went still again. The reflection turned to normal. Chloe stared at it for a moment, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had it been a trick of the light again? Was she losing her mind? Or had the mirror done something? A faint, almost imperceptible pulse emanated from the glass, like a heartbeat, steady, rhythmic, and unsettling. Chloe's hand remained hovering over the mirror's surface, and she realized she couldn't tear her gaze away. It was as if the mirror had a strange hold over her, one she couldn't explain. But no, she couldn't let it control her. It was just a mirror. She had to be rational. Shaking her head, Chloe backed away from it, her eyes never leaving the glass. She had to get a grip. She had to stop letting it get to her. But as she turned away, the whisper came again, louder this time, more insistent. "Chloe." Her pulse spiked. This time it didn't come from the mirror, but from somewhere deeper, from somewhere inside her. She gasped, a chill running down her spine. The voice was inside her own head. It's already too late. The apartment felt colder still. The shadows seemed to stretch and flicker at the edges of her vision, as though they were alive, moving in the corners of the room. She needed to sleep. She needed to forget about the mirror for now. But deep down, Chloe knew that the feeling, the pull, the presence, would not let her rest. Not until she gave in. Chloe lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. The whispering had stopped, but the feeling of being watched remained, like a weight pressing on her chest. She hadn't been able to shake the image of the mirror, the distorted reflection, the warped figure, and the strange pulse that seemed to beat from the glass. She tried to tell herself it was just her mind playing tricks. She'd had a long day after all. The strange encounter at the antique shop, the excitement of getting the mirror home. Maybe it was all too much. But no matter how hard she tried to convince herself, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. The apartment felt unnervingly quiet. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the building settling were the only sounds. But Chloe felt as though the silence held something else, something darker. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly 3 a.m. The usual sound of traffic from the street below was absent, as though the whole city had gone still. A strange fog had settled over her mind, making it impossible to drift off into sleep. After what felt like hours of tossing and turning, Chloe finally gave up. She swung her legs off the side of the bed and stood up, the cold floor sending a shiver up her spine. The apartment was bathed in a pale, ghostly light from the streetlights. Outside, it was almost as if the world was holding its breath. Without thinking, she found herself walking toward the living room, toward the mirror. The mirror. It was sitting there on the couch, draped in the same faded fabric. She had meant to cover it properly, hide it away, but it had been so strange, so insistent that she couldn't stop herself from taking another look. Her bare feet made no sound on the floor as she approached it. The room felt colder now, a chill that seeped deep into her bones. The faint pulse of the mirror seemed to vibrate in her chest, as though it were calling her. She stopped just in front of the glass, her reflection staring back at her. For a long moment, nothing happened. The mirror was silent still, just as it had been when she first brought it home. But Chloe couldn't shake the sense that something was different. The air felt charged, as if some unseen force was gathering just beneath the surface. She reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against the cold frame. The moment her skin made contact with the metal, a sharp jolt ran through her body, like an electric shock. She pulled her hand away quickly, heart racing. Her reflection seemed to flicker. Just a brief moment of distortion, like static on a television screen. But Chloe's eyes were glued to it, watching as the image of herself seemed to shift. She wasn't sure if it was her imagination, but the reflection of herself in the mirror looked somehow wrong. Her face was too pale, her eyes too wide. Her lips were parted slightly, as if in a silent scream. But the most disturbing part was the way her reflection moved, ever so slightly out of sync with her own motions. Her breath caught in her throat. Was it following her? She backed away, but her reflection didn't move with her. It stayed in place, staring directly at her, and then, in a smooth, deliberate motion, it raised its hand and pressed it to the glass, exactly where Chloe's hand had been moments before. Chloe's pulse quickened. She took another step back, and the reflection followed. She took another step back toward the wall, and once again the reflection did the same, but its movements were slower, deliberate, like it was watching her every move. She felt trapped. Suddenly, a voice whispered from the mirror, "Come closer, Chloe." It was the same voice from earlier, the one that had echoed in her head. That insistent whisper. It sent a shiver down her spine, and she felt the blood drain from her face. Her legs were frozen, unable to move. But the whisper didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent. Closer. Without thinking, Chloe stepped forward, drawn toward the mirror as if something beyond the glass was pulling her in. Her fingers brushed the cold surface once again. This time she didn't pull away. The chill seeped into her skin, crawling beneath the surface, numbing her entire arm. Then she felt it. Something was there, on the other side. Something alive. It was like a pulse, a rhythmic beating that seemed to come from deep within the glass. Chloe's heart raced in sync with the strange pulse, and she felt herself swaying slightly, as though the room were spinning. Chloe. This time the voice wasn't just a whisper. It was stronger, clearer, and it sounded as though it were coming from the other side of the mirror itself. Without thinking, Chloe placed her hand flat against the surface of the glass, pushing just a little harder, as though she were trying to reach whatever was beyond it. Her fingers sank into the surface. The mirror rippled under her touch, warping like liquid. A low, hollow sound echoed in the room. The reflection in the glass began to change again. The image of herself distorted, her features stretching and twisting unnaturally. The face in the mirror grinned, a slow, creeping smile that made her blood run cold. And then, the reflection did something that made Chloe's heart stop. It stepped forward. The figure in the glass was moving. It was no longer a reflection. It was as though the mirror itself had become a window, and something or someone on the other side was reaching out to her. Chloe stumbled backward, her breath ragged. The mirror rippled again, and for a brief moment she could have sworn she saw something standing there, just beyond the glass. Something tall and dark, its features indistinct, but its presence overwhelming. The pulse in the mirror quickened. The voice grew louder, more desperate. Chloe. Without thinking, she spun around and ran. She couldn't look at the mirror anymore. She couldn't stay in that room. But no matter how fast she ran, the voice followed her, echoing through her mind. You can't escape, Chloe. She slammed the door to her bedroom behind her, but the words didn't stop. The feeling didn't go away. And when she turned back to look at the mirror, she saw her reflection standing there. Not in the living room, but right behind her, just over her shoulder. And this time, the reflection was smiling. Chloe barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that grin, the twisted smile of the reflection in the mirror. And every time she woke, her heart was pounding, her body drenched in sweat. It was the voice that haunted her most. The voice that whispered her name from the depths of the mirror, from something she couldn't quite comprehend. At times, she thought she heard it even when she wasn't near the mirror, as though it followed her wherever she went. By morning, the exhaustion had settled, deep into her bones, and Chloe knew she couldn't keep living like this. She had to figure out what was happening. She couldn't just keep running from it. Her fingers hovered over the phone, but she hesitated. Who could she even talk to? What would she say? Hey, I bought a mirror, and now it's haunted, and I'm hearing voices in my head. No one would believe her. She was starting to wonder if maybe she was losing her mind, but it wasn't just in her head. She knew that now. She felt it. The mirror had changed something in her. It wasn't just the voice or the strange movements of the reflection. There was an energy to it, a darkness that seemed to seep into her thoughts, twisting them in ways she didn't understand. It was as if the more she interacted with the mirror, the more it began to change her, little by little. Chloe stood in front of the mirror again, staring at her reflection. The mirror seemed different this time. The air around it felt heavier, thicker. A shiver crawled down her spine, but she didn't look away. She couldn't. She was drawn to it, helpless to resist. The reflection in the glass wasn't her own, anymore. Not completely. It was a twisted version of her, a distorted, darker version with hollow eyes and an almost predatory smile. It was subtle, but Chloe could see it. The reflection was mocking her. It moved just a little too slowly, as though it had all the time in the world while she was stuck in this endless nightmare. As her fingers hovered over the glass again, she felt the pulse, the same as before. rhythmic and slow, but growing louder. Now, a steady thrum that seemed to vibrate in her chest. And then it happened. The reflection's grin stretched wider, impossibly wide, its mouth splitting at the edges, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Chloe gasped, stepping back in horror, but the reflection didn't stop. It grinned harder, its eyes now burning, with a sickly yellow light. "Chloe, come closer," it whispered. Chloe's heart hammered in her chest. She couldn't look away. The reflection wasn't just her anymore. It was something else entirely. Something malicious. Something alive. The air felt thick with it, suffocating. And yet Chloe was frozen in place, unable to move, as if the reflection was drawing her in with an invisible force. Then, as if in a trance, Chloe stepped closer to the mirror. Her hand reached out, her fingers brushing against the cool glass surface. It felt wrong, like her skin was being pulled in, like something on the other side of the mirror was holding her in place. Closer. The voice was louder now, more urgent. The reflection was no longer just mimicking her. It was alive and it was waiting. Chloe felt a strange pull in her chest, a tug, as if the mirror itself were calling her. The pulse was growing louder, faster, almost frenetic. She felt her body sway, her breath quickening, but she didn't want to do it. She wanted to pull away. She wanted to escape. But the voice wouldn't let her. "You've already chosen," it whispered, its voice soft and mocking, sending chills down her spine. "You can't stop now." She couldn't remember how long she had been standing there, her fingers pressed against the glass. Her reflection was closer now, its face only inches away from her own. She could feel its cold breath on her skin, though the mirror itself was cold to the touch. She could see the distortion in its eyes, the black inky voids swallowing the yellow light. They were no longer human eyes. The reflection was something else, something darker. And for a brief, terrible moment, Chloe felt something inside her stir, something that had been dormant, waiting for this moment. And then, just as quickly, the reflection pulled away, disappearing into the depths of the mirror. The pulse in the air slowed, and the room seemed to breathe again. Chloe stumbled back, her knees weak, her mind racing. She wasn't sure whether she had actually touched the mirror or if it was some trick of her mind, some hallucination. But she couldn't deny the feeling, the weight of it, the sense of something reaching out to her, something from beyond the glass. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned away from the mirror, but she could still feel its pull, the invisible thread that had bound her to it. As she backed away, she glanced at the clock. It was just after noon. She had been standing there for hours, but something didn't make sense. The reflection, her reflection, hadn't changed. It still wore the same sickly grin. And when Chloe looked back at the mirror, her reflection was still there, but it wasn't her anymore. It was the thing in the glass, the twisted thing that had been watching her. It wasn't smiling anymore. It was waiting. She had to get away from it. She had to leave. Chloe grabbed her coat from the chair, her hands trembling as she pulled it on. She didn't know where she was going, but she had to leave this apartment. She had to get away from the mirror, from whatever was inside it. But as she reached for the door, the voice came again, echoing in her mind. "It's already too late." Chloe froze, her hand on the doorknob. The words didn't just echo. They resonated through her entire body, as if they were vibrating inside her. The pull of the mirror was stronger now, like a magnetic force she couldn't escape. She could feel the mirror's influence, its cold grip tightening around her chest. Her body felt heavy. Her head was spinning. She couldn't breathe. "Come back," the voice urged. "It's waiting for you." Chloe stumbled toward the door, her mind a blur. The voice in her head echoed louder now, its words relentless, gnawing at the edges of her sanity. "Come back." She shook her head, pressing her hands against her temples, trying to block it out. No, I'm not going back." But with each passing second, the pull grew stronger, like an invisible chain tightening around her chest, dragging her back toward the mirror. The door handle felt slippery in her hand as, though something unseen was trying to pry her fingers away from it. Her breath quickened. She had to leave. She had to escape. It's already too late. The voice whispered again, so close as if it were right next to her, inside her own thoughts. Chloe gasped, the cold seeping deeper into her bones. She couldn't breathe. Her chest felt tight, as though she were being squeezed from all sides. In the mirror's reflection, she saw herself, standing by the door, frozen in place, eyes wide with terror. But she wasn't the only one in the glass. There was something else, standing just behind her. Something dark, towering and indistinct, its features blurred as though they were shifting constantly. A shadow, formless but oppressive. She felt its presence more than she saw it. "It's calling you," the voice whispered. Chloe's pulse raced, and in that moment, the world seemed to tilt. The air around her grew thick, suffocating. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in. She couldn't get away. Her feet moved of their own accord. She wasn't walking. She was being pulled. The invisible force, like a string attached to her chest, guided her back toward the couch where the mirror lay, untouched since last night. "Don't resist," she gasped as she was drawn toward the mirror, her mind screaming to stop, to break free, but she couldn't. "You belong to me now." The moment she touched the mirror again, the world fractured. Her body jerked forward as if the mirror had opened its mouth, swallowing her whole. She felt a pull, a violent yank that seemed to tear her apart. The glass was no longer cold but burning hot, as though the surface itself was alive. Her fingers dug into the frame and the room around her blurred, twisting in impossible ways. The air thick with a dark, oppressive weight. The mirror rippled, and she was falling, sinking into the darkness, pulled down into a cold, empty void, and then everything went black. Chloe awoke with a sharp breath, her body jolting upright. Her heart raced in her chest as she struggled to make sense of what had just happened. She was sitting on the floor now, her back pressed against the couch. The mirror was in front of her, still resting as it had been, but the air in the room felt different. Thick, suffocating, as though it held something just beyond her reach. The mirror was not just a reflection anymore. It was a gateway. Her hands trembled as she slowly stood, feeling the dizzying effects of whatever she had just experienced. She wasn't sure how long she had been out, how much time had passed, but the sense of unease, of something dark waiting, for her hadn't dissipated. The voice, the force, it was still here. "Come closer, Chloe." The voice was different this time, not just in her mind, but in the room itself, as if it were being spoken aloud. The words were soft, almost gentle, but the undertone was sharp, like a knife hidden beneath a velvet glove. Chloe spun around, her head whipping from side to side. There was nothing there, no one in the apartment, but the air. It felt wrong. The coldness wasn't just physical anymore. It was inside her too, an icy grip around her chest, suffocating her. "You can't escape me," the voice whispered again. "You're mine now." Tears welled up in Chloe's eyes. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. This was a nightmare. But the burning in her chest, the weight on her lungs, she knew it wasn't a dream. The mirror had done something to her. It had taken something from her. And now it was going to take everything. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't keep running in circles, playing this sick game. She had to destroy the mirror. That was the only way. She had to end it before it destroyed her. But as Chloe turned back toward the couch to pick up the mirror, the glass shifted. The surface rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. And for a brief moment, the room behind her was different. The apartment wasn't the same. The walls were darker, the windows blackened, the floor covered in a layer of thick, inky shadow. And standing in the reflection was her, or it looked like her. Her reflection was twisted, contorted, not her. It was a dark, hollow version of herself, grinning wickedly, its eyes glowing with that same sickly yellow light. It moved on its own, unlike her, and it was closer now, far too close. No, this wasn't right. Chloe stumbled backward, her head spinning. The reflection reached out toward her, its hand pressing against the glass in slow, deliberate movements. And the voice, it wasn't just speaking anymore, it was laughing. "You can't leave me, Chloe, you can never leave me." The room grew darker still, and the walls seemed to close in. Her breath came in ragged gasps. "You belong to me now." The voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a roar, a thunderous crash of sound that filled the room and the space inside her mind. And Chloe realized, with a sickening jolt of understanding, that the mirror was no longer a thing she could control. It wasn't just reflecting her, it was pulling her in. It had taken her, and now it wanted everything. The reflection grinned. Chloe reached for the mirror with trembling hands, but the moment her fingers touched the glass again, she felt the sharp sting of something ripping inside her, a terrible, tearing force that pulled her inward. The glass seemed to stretch and bend as the reflection reached for her, pulling her into the dark depths behind the mirror. The world shattered. Chloe's fingers trembled against the mirror's surface as she tried to pull away, but the glass was like molten stone, burning her skin as she struggled. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. It was as though her voice had been stolen from her, trapped in the space between the glass and the room beyond. The reflection in the mirror, the thing that had been pretending to be her, grinned, wider, its yellow eyes burning with a hunger that sent a sharp, piercing chill through her veins. It was no longer a mere reflection. It was alive now, and it was pulling her in. Chloe, the voice again, this time not just in her head, but reverberating from all around her. It was the reflection speaking, but it was also the mirror itself, the dark void that had opened up inside the glass. The fabric of reality itself seemed to warp around her, bending and twisting. The walls of her apartment were fading, turning into something dark and formless, as if they were dissolving into the blackness of the mirror. She screamed again, but nothing came out. Panic rose in her throat, suffocating her. The glass wasn't cold anymore. It was burning hot, like a fire that reached deep into her bones. She could feel her skin begin to sizzle, the searing heat of the mirror seeping through her fingertips, pulling her deeper. "Come to me, Chloe." She didn't want to. Go. She couldn't. She fought against it, desperately yanking her hand away, but the pull was too strong. Her body was no longer her own. She could feel her legs moving, taking a step forward, then another. She wasn't walking. She was being dragged by the reflection, by the thing in the glass. The voice was louder now, so loud it filled her entire mind, drowned out every other thought, every other whisper. "You've always belonged to me. This was meant to happen. You can't fight it. Not anymore." She felt herself being pulled closer and closer to the glass. Her chest was tight, her head spinning. The world around her had shattered into fragments of shadow and light, and the mirror was all that remained, a doorway, an invitation, an end. Suddenly her vision blurred. The edges of her surroundings began to fade into darkness. The blackness from the mirror spread, leaking out from the edges, crawling across the room. The air felt heavier with each passing moment, suffocating, as if she was drowning in the thick, oppressive presence that filled the space. "Step through, Chloe." And then, the room went silent. For a brief moment, everything stopped. The oppressive air, the pull of the mirror, the whispers, it all ceased. She stood there, breathless, staring at the smooth surface of the glass. She felt something shift. Beneath her skin, something familiar, something that didn't feel quite right. "Come to me," the voice didn't just speak now. It pulsed like a heartbeat, a deep rhythmic thrum that echoed inside her chest, vibrating through her bones. Chloe felt the strange pull again, but this time she didn't resist. She couldn't. The mirror was no longer a reflection. It was no longer just an object. It was alive, and it had been waiting for her. Her heart raced in her chest as the mirror began to warp again, the glass distorting, twisting, bending in impossible ways. The familiar walls of her apartment faded, dissolving into the dark void. Behind the glass, she could hear it now, faintly at first, whispers like hundreds of voices murmuring just out of reach. "Chloe, come closer." She couldn't stop herself. Her hand reached for the glass again, her fingertips brushing against the cool surface. And as they did, the mirror seemed to breathe. It sucked her in, pulling her forward with a violent force, and the air went cold, so cold that it felt like ice was wrapping around her heart. Her fingers slipped deeper into the mirror, and suddenly there was no longer any room behind her. There was no longer a room. There was only darkness. She felt herself falling into the mirror, into nothing. It was as though the entire world had collapsed around her, leaving only this one endless abyss. She couldn't tell if she was still standing or floating. The darkness wrapped around her like a suffocating cloak, crushing the air from her lungs. And then there was movement. Chloe's body twisted as something heavy, something enormous passed by her in the dark. The sensation was like being trapped in a current of black water, where the shadows themselves had weight, had substance. She tried to scream, but the darkness swallowed every sound before it could escape. "Welcome, Chloe." The voice echoed around her, the presence growing stronger. Chloe's heart slammed against her ribs, but she could barely move, as though the darkness had imprisoned her limbs. The whisper came again, but this time it wasn't just a whisper. It was a presence, pressing down on her mind, sliding through her thoughts, wrapping around her consciousness. "You are mine. You always have been." Chloe struggled against the pull, but the darkness was too strong. There was no escape. And then the world began to shift once more. The darkness dissolved into a sharp, blinding light, and Chloe found herself standing in a new place, a place she didn't recognize. It was the apartment. But it wasn't her apartment. It was wrong. The walls were decayed, rotting with time. The air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. The floor beneath her feet was cracked, broken, as if the building had been abandoned for decades. Everything was covered in a layer of dust, but the most disturbing thing was the reflection. The mirror was here too, standing against the far wall. But it wasn't just any mirror. It was the one she had brought home, the one that had been calling to her. And as she approached it, her heart pounding in her chest, she saw what was inside. Her reflection was still there, but it wasn't her. Not anymore. It was the thing, and it was smiling. "It's over now, Chloe. Welcome home." Chloe's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the mirror. The reflection, the thing that had once been her, was still there. It smiled at her, but this time, there was no humor in, only a cold, predatory satisfaction. Its yellow eyes gleamed with that same hunger, as though it had been waiting for her to arrive. The air around her felt thick, oppressive. The decaying apartment seemed to stretch on forever, each cracked wall and broken window staring at her, like a silent witness to her descent. The room was quiet now, but the silence was deafening, suffocating. And in the middle of it all, the mirror stood, calling to her, demanding her attention. "Welcome home, Chloe." The voice. It was no longer just a whisper in her mind. It was everywhere, inside her skull, reverberating through the air, filling the space around her. She could feel its presence like a weight on her chest, suffocating her. Her reflection in the mirror moved, slowly, deliberately. It didn't just mimic her, it was alive. Chloe's legs shook beneath her, but she couldn't pull herself away. She was rooted to the spot, as if the mirror had grown roots inside her, holding her in place. The thing, her reflection, smiled wider, its jagged teeth gleaming in the dim light. Its mouth stretched unnaturally, far wider than a human's should be, until it was almost impossibly large. "You are mine now, Chloe." The voice echoed in her head again, and with it came a sense of complete and total loss. It wasn't just the mirror that had claimed her. It was this place, this other side, the space behind the glass where reality itself seemed to twist and bend. She tried to step back, but her legs wouldn't move. The air was so thick now, so heavy, that each breath she took felt like it was suffocating her from the inside out. The reflection's eyes didn't leave hers. It was studying her, waiting for something. Chloe wasn't sure what, but she knew, she felt it in her bones, that the longer she stood there, the more she was becoming a part of this place, this other side. Suddenly the reflection in the glass reached out. No, not just reached. It lunged forward, slamming into the glass with such force that it caused the entire room to shudder. The glass rippled, undulating like liquid, and Chloe's heartbeat skipped a beat as she took a step back in horror. But the reflection didn't stop. It pressed its hand against the surface of the glass, and as it did, Chloe felt a strange sensation, a pull inside her chest, an invisible force, like fingers tugging at her very soul. "Come to me, Chloe." The voice was stronger now, it was everywhere. Inside her head, inside her body. She could feel it spreading through her, filling her with a cold emptiness. The mirror pulsed again, rippling with darkness, and for a brief moment, Chloe saw something inside it. It wasn't just the reflection anymore. There was another world. Behind the glass, a world that seemed alive, but wrong. The walls were dark and jagged, like the inside of a decaying cave, with veins of black energy twisting through them. Shadows moved inside that space. Things that crawled and slithered, whispering in a language she couldn't understand. "It's time, Chloe." And before she could react, before she could even move, the mirror pulled her forward. Her body jerked toward the glass, her feet leaving the ground as if an invisible hand had grabbed her and yanked her forward. She tried to scream, but it was too late. The world around her twisted, collapsed, and everything shattered. For a moment there was nothing. No light, no sound, no air. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, Chloe fell. She hit the ground with a sickening thud, and pain exploded in her body. She gasped, the world around her coming into focus. But it wasn't her apartment anymore. She was somewhere else, somewhere dark. The floor beneath her was cold, jagged, as if she had fallen onto a surface of broken stone. The air was thick with the smell of decay, of rotting wood and something other. Something wrong. Chloe scrambled to her feet, her heart racing, her mind spinning. Her hands pressed against the cold stone as she struggled to stand, but her legs felt weak, her body trembling with the shock of whatever had just happened. She was in a different place now, a different world. She could hear them. The whispers. They were faint at first, like the distant murmur of voices lost in a storm. But as Chloe's senses sharpened, the whispers became clearer. They weren't just whispers. They were conversations, a language she didn't understand, but one that felt ancient, dark, like something that had been buried deep beneath the earth, waiting for the right moment to rise again. And then, the laughter. It came from all around her, the same cold, malicious laughter that had echoed in her mind, that had torn her apart from the inside. It filled her chest, her head, vibrating inside her bones. "You belong here now, Chloe." The voice was closer now, not just in her head, but in the air around her. It was real, alive. The reflection, the thing, was still there, watching her. But it wasn't just a mirror anymore. It was a presence, a force, a being. Chloe turned, her breath shallow, her pulse hammering in her throat. She had to get out of here. She had to escape. But there was no way out, there was nowhere to run. The floor beneath her shifted, and from the darkness, shapes began to move. Long, shadowy figures slithered and crawled from the blackened corners of the room, their eyes glowing in the dark. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if they were all calling to her, urging her closer. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. She couldn't escape, and in the distance, through the haze of shadows, Chloe saw something, or someone, moving toward her. It was tall, impossibly tall, with a form that shimmered in and out of focus, like a mirage. Its eyes burned with the same yellow glow that had haunted her for days. The same eyes as her reflection. "You've made your choice, Chloe." And as the figure stepped into the light, Chloe finally understood. She was never going to leave this place. This was her new reality, and it had been waiting for her all along. Chloe couldn't breathe. The darkness around her pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, as though it were alive. Every whisper, every movement seemed to vibrate with a terrible purpose. Her chest tightened, her limbs felt numb, and the weight of the air itself seemed to press down on her, threatening to crush her under its oppressive force. The tall, shadowy figure moved closer, its form still shifting and flickering like a flame caught in a gust of wind. Its eyes, those hollow, glowing yellow orbs, burned through the dark, focusing entirely on her. Chloe felt herself freeze. Every instinct told her to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The whispers in the dark swirled around her, growing louder, more frantic, as if the very walls of this place were closing in on her. "You've arrived, Chloe." The voice was smoother now, a low, almost hypnotic rumble that reverberated through the very ground beneath her feet. It didn't just come from the figure. It came from the air, the darkness, the very essence of this place. The mirror's grip on her was tightening. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was them too. And they weren't just in the mirror anymore. They were here, in this world. The thing, the reflection, stepped forward, its form growing more solid with each passing second, until it was just a few feet away from Chloe. She wanted to back away, to escape, but her legs were frozen, her body refusing to obey. The space around her seemed to warp, the shadows deepening, stretching, until it felt like she was standing in the center of a massive, oppressive cage, a prison of her own making. The figure raised one long, twisted hand, and as it did, the shadows around Chloe responded, writhing and curling like living things. The walls, the floor, the very air began to twist, bending toward her, pressing in. "You belong to me now, Chloe. You've always belonged to me." The words slid into her mind, like poison, their meaning sinking deep into her chest. Chloe tried to push them away, but they didn't fade. They were real. The truth of them, her truth, was inescapable. The reflection, the thing in the mirror, had been calling her for a reason. It had always been waiting for her. She wasn't meant to escape. She was meant to be here. "We've waited for so long, Chloe. Welcome home." Chloe's heart thundered in her chest. The figure reached out, and she could feel its cold fingers brushing her skin, sending a shock of ice through her body. The contact burned. It wasn't just cold. It was otherworldly, a sensation that shouldn't exist in this world. Something that belonged to the dark corners of the universe. Her vision blurred. The room shifted again, the shadows closing in around her, wrapping around her like a cocoon. The whispers were louder now, deafening. They spoke in tongues, their words meaningless but chilling all the same. They were everywhere, swirling through, her mind pushing her thoughts aside, taking over her very essence. She fought against it, but her body was no longer her own. She felt herself becoming a part of this place, this darkness. It was suffocating her, pulling her into it. The figure in front of her leaned closer, its eyes glowing brighter, its form sharper, more defined. Chloe could see its mouth now, wide and jagged, like a maw ready to swallow her whole. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive in the way she understood life. It was something ancient, something old, something that existed beyond the realms of reality. You were always mine, Chloe. Always. The words echoed in her head, and she felt a sickening shudder pass through her. She wasn't in control anymore. She was a puppet, strung up by the dark forces of this place, and the mirror had been the thread that had tied her here. It was no longer just a cursed object. It was a gate, a threshold to this world, a way for them to cross over. The reflection had been her guide. It had shown her the way, and now it was time for her to become one with this world. No. Chloe barely recognized her own voice. It was a whisper, weak and desperate, like a threadbare echo of the person she used to be. She tried to shake her head, tried to fight back, but it was futile. The darkness was too strong, its grip too tight. The figure in front of her reached out again, but this time it didn't just touch her. Its hand went through her like cold liquid shadow merging with her own skin, sinking deep into her very core. Chloe gasped, her body jerking, but the figure wasn't pulling away. It was merging with her, its darkness flooding her veins. She screamed then, a real scream this time, but it was drowned by the cacophony of whispers, the laughter that filled every inch of her consciousness. The world around her spun, twisted, and then there was nothing. Chloe opened her eyes. For a brief, terrifying moment, she wasn't sure where she was. The air was thick, suffocating. She felt disoriented, as if she had just woken from a dream or a nightmare. But the darkness around her was real. She could feel it, pressing in on her, heavy and suffocating. The floor beneath her was cold and uneven. Her hands pressed against it, pushing herself up. But as she stood, she realized that something was different. She wasn't alone. The shadowy figure was gone, but its presence remained. She could feel it in the air. The whispers were gone, but the silence was worse. It was an empty, oppressive silence, the kind that made her feel like she was being watched. And as she glanced around, her heart skipped a beat. She was still in the same place, but now, everything was different. The walls had changed. Where the broken stone and the shadows had once been, there was now a new reflection, a new reality. Her reflection. Or at least the thing that had once been her. But it wasn't just the figure she'd seen in the mirror. It was her, or what was left of her. Chloe's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the pale, twisted version of herself, standing in the mirror, a grotesque smile stretching across its face. The reflection, the thing, was staring back at her, its eyes wide with that same yellow, sickly glow. And then it spoke, the voice echoing through the empty space. "Welcome to your new home, Chloe. Welcome to your cage." The cold seeped into Chloe's bones like an infection. The air in this new world was thick, suffocating, as though the very atmosphere was alive with malice. The walls, the floor, the endless stretching shadows, it all felt wrong. It was as though she had been swallowed whole by the mirror, and now she existed within its depths, caught between the reflection and reality. Her reflection, the thing, stood there, watching her, grinning that grotesque grin, its yellow eyes burning with that same insatiable hunger. Chloe's breath hitched in her throat as she stepped back, her mind spiraling with confusion and dread. The reflection in the mirror was no longer just an imitation of her. It had become her, yet something far worse, far darker. and as she looked into its eyes, she could feel it. It was her. Or was it? She tried to look away, but it was like the mirror had rooted her to the spot. Her legs refused to move. The glass before her pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, breathing in and out like some monstrous entity, and the whispers began again, crawling through her mind like spiders, wrapping her thoughts in a web of fear. "You're home now, Chloe." The voice came from all directions, smooth and seductively cold. It was familiar, like the echo of a forgotten dream, yet utterly alien, as if it didn't belong to her anymore. She could feel the coldness of its words seep deep into her bones, filling the empty space in her chest with a coldness she couldn't escape. Her reflection, it, leaned closer, its mouth stretching open wide, revealing rows of jagged, razor-sharp teeth. Its eyes burned brighter, consuming her with their unnatural glow. "I am you, and you are me." The words slid through her mind like oil, slick and suffocating. Chloe gasped, her heartbeat quickening as she struggled to process the meaning. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but her body wouldn't obey her. She felt trapped. There was no escape from the reflection, from the mirror. No, Chloe thought, clinging to what little sanity remained. "I am not you," but the reflection only, grinned wider. Its lips pulled back from its teeth in a mocking smile that made her stomach churn. "You always have been. You just didn't know it." It was true in a way. Chloe couldn't deny the truth of the reflection's words. Her life, her reality, had always been a mirror, a distorted, fractured version of what was real. Every corner of her life had been shadowed by the mirror's influence, pulling at the edges of her perception, warping her understanding of who she was. And now, she was here, trapped in a world of shadows, a world that wasn't real, yet felt more real than anything she had ever known. Her heart raced as she pressed her hands to her temples, trying to block out the voice, the whispers, the overwhelming presence of the reflection. She could feel her mind starting to crack, like a piece of glass under too much pressure. She wasn't sure how much time had passed, or how long she had been standing there, staring into the mirror. The world around her had begun to bend, to twist, until it felt as though reality itself was melting into the shadows. The reflection in the mirror flickered again, like an old film reel skipping frames. Chloe gasped, her body jolting as something shifted in the space behind the glass. "You don't belong in this world anymore, Chloe." The reflection's voice had become deeper, darker, almost otherworldly. Its eyes gleamed, and Chloe felt an unsettling pull, like gravity shifting, forcing her closer to the glass. She reached out, trying to stop herself, but it was no use. The mirror was calling to her, beckoning her forward, and she couldn't resist. With a sickening lurch in her stomach, Chloe stepped toward the mirror. She felt the coldness of the glass against her skin, but it wasn't just cold. It was alive. A living, breathing thing that seemed to pulse beneath her fingertips. The glass shuddered beneath her touch, vibrating with an energy she couldn't understand. And then, just like that, she was pulled in. Her body jerked forward, as though an invisible force had yanked her into the mirror itself. She screamed, but the sound was muffled, like it was being swallowed by the void. The world around her seemed to unravel, the shadows creeping in, and for a moment, everything was silent. When the silence finally broke, Chloe found herself standing in a place she couldn't comprehend. It was a reflection of the world, yet completely wrong. The sky above was cracked as if it had been shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, bleeding black ink into the air. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and uneven, covered in thick layers of ash, as though this place had been forgotten by time itself. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the shadows stretched long, swallowing everything in their wake. And in the distance, Chloe saw them. The others. They were like her, but not. They were broken, twisted versions of people, pale, hollow-eyed, with long, gnarled limbs and distorted features. Some of them crawled on all fours, others hovered in the air like specters, their forms flickering in and out of focus. Their eyes, those same burning yellow orbs, turned toward her, and Chloe felt the weight of their gaze like cold fingers brushing her skin. One of them, the largest of them all, stepped forward. Its mouth opened wide, revealing a grotesque row of teeth, just like the reflections. "Welcome to your true home, Chloe." The voice was so familiar it made her stomach turn. It was the same voice she had heard in the mirror, in her mind, in the dark corners of her soul. "This is where you belong." Chloe took a step back, her pulse hammering in her ears. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The others were closing in on her, their twisted forms moving toward her with a slow, deliberate pace. She could hear the whispers again, this time louder, more frantic. They were calling her, urging her to join them, to become one of them, to surrender to this world of shadows. But Chloe fought. She fought with everything she had left. She couldn't become like them. She wouldn't give in. "No, I'm not like you." The others stopped, their eyes widening in unison, like they were taken aback by her defiance. The figure in front of her, the one who had spoken, tilted its head, the grin on its face stretching impossibly wide. "Oh, but you already are." The others closed in, their twisted forms moving silently across the barren, ash-covered ground, their yellow eyes gleaming with an unsettling hunger. Chloe's heart pounded in her chest as she backed away, her legs unsteady, her body trembling from the weight of the oppressive darkness pressing in on her. She wanted to run, to scream, but the air here was too thick. Every breath she took felt like inhaling shards of glass, and her legs felt heavy, as if they were wading through thick, viscous mud. The whispers were deafening now, filling her skull, crawling through her veins, drowning her thoughts. "They're coming for you, Chloe. You belong to them. You belong to the shadows now." The figure that had spoken to her, the largest of them all, took another slow step forward. Its face, if it could even be called a face, was barely human, a twisted mockery of a person. Jagged, broken features, hollow, black eyes. Its mouth stretched too wide to be natural, and its voice was like nails on a chalkboard scraping against her sanity. "You don't belong in that world anymore, Chloe." Chloe felt her knees buckle beneath her, and she collapsed to the ground. The world spun, and she could barely keep her thoughts in order. The ground beneath her was cold, uneven. The air tasted like metal and decay. "Please, no," she whispered. The words to herself, a last desperate plea for mercy. But there was no one to hear it. The others were circling her now, closing in like vultures. She was the prey. She could feel it. Feel their hunger pressing in on her like a wave, suffocating her from all sides. She couldn't escape. The figure loomed over her now, towering above her, and Chloe looked up into its glowing yellow eyes. She couldn't look away. There was something about them, something so familiar. "You're not real," she thought desperately. "This isn't real." But it was real. It had to be. The longer she stood here, the more she felt it. This place was eating away at her, eroding her sanity, her identity, until there was nothing left but the darkness, the whispers, the relentless pull of the mirror. The figure reached down, its cold, long fingers brushing against Chloe's forehead. Her body went stiff, her thoughts scattering like broken glass, and the cold sensation spread through her like a poison, numbing her from the inside out. The reflection, the thing that had been her, was inside her now, swirling through her thoughts, claiming her mind. Chloe wanted to scream, to fight back, but it was like her body was no longer her own. She was trapped in the reflection. She had always been trapped. "We've been waiting for you, Chloe." The words echoed in her mind, and with them came the terrifying realization that she had been lost to this world from the beginning. The mirror hadn't just trapped her. It had crafted her. She had never escaped. This world was where she had always belonged. She was never meant for the real world, never meant for the life she had fought to protect. It had all been a lie, a veil that had kept her from seeing the truth that she was the reflection. She was the other side. And the real Chloe, the one who had once lived in that other world, she had never existed at all. Chloe's mind fractured then, the pieces of her sanity splintering like glass. The truth, the awful, unbearable truth, broke her in ways she couldn't comprehend. The reflection, the whispers, the cold, decaying world around her, they were all her. Now she was them. She was this place, and in that moment Chloe understood. The others weren't just shadows. They were parts of her. Fractured pieces of her mind, her soul, scattered across this place. They were echoes of the person she used to be, twisted and broken, just as she had been twisted and broken by the mirror's influence. "You're home, Chloe." The voice wasn't just one voice anymore. It was a chorus of voices, herself from all the twisted versions of her that had been created in the reflection. The shadows closed in, and Chloe couldn't tell where she ended and they began. "We're home." A terrible calm settled over her then. It was not relief, but something worse, an acceptance. The mirror had been right all along. She had never escaped. She had been waiting for this moment, for this place. Her body, her mind, her soul, they were all part of this world now. They were part of the mirror's dark embrace. The others swarmed around her, pulling her deeper into the shadows, merging with her. And as they did, Chloe's form flickered, her true form, her real form. She was the reflection. And now there was nothing left but the void. The whispers faded, the darkness closed in, and the mirror, that ancient cursed thing, shattered. Chloe's story is only one of many, trapped in the darkness of the mirror. But what if the mirror is watching you too? Have you felt its pull? If you want to uncover more chilling secrets, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what's lurking in the reflection. And remember, once you stare into the mirror, it sees you back. Hit the bell icon so you don't lose yourself in the shadows. The final sound is the soft echo of glass cracking,